Joining me are Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, and Michael Danby, former federal Labor politician and chairman of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. Michael Danby, Angus Taylor has been given a policy recommending a restriction on immigration from areas in 13 countries where Muslim extremists dominate. Is that a good idea?
Well, it's very focused. It's on not bans on entire countries. It's bans on areas from those countries where there is Islamist extremism. So I think it's going to be very hard to argue against. I think it's been floated in order to see what kind of a reaction it would get. And I think after Bondi, it's going to be harder to argue against, particularly when Sir Keir Starmer's pushing the same kind of policies.
Michael Danby said this was leaked just as a sort of trial balloon. Is that how you see it? Why do you think it was leaked, Michael Kroger, and do you think it's a good idea?
I'm not sure why, but it's certainly going to help Angus Taylor. 70 to 75% of the country would agree with that policy. The rest, you've got the extreme left and those that, it's too complex for them. But overwhelmingly, what's the coalition saying? People that come from Islamic terrorist parts of the world shouldn't be allowed into Australia. Why would that be controversial, Andrew, in the slightest? So let's just hope the policy is approved and released imminently, because we've got a by-election down here, a state by-election. There's a federal by-election in New South Wales coming up, as we know. And the principal reason for One Nation's rise from 6 to 28% is because the average Australian out there is seeing what's happening around the world, is seeing what's happening in Western countries. I've heard snippets of speeches by Marco Rubio and now understand that Western civilisation is under threat unless you stand up against Islamist extremism. And that's why an overwhelming majority of Australians would support this policy, and let's hope Angus releases it sooner.
Well, I'm not sure that it was one that he wanted leaked today, because he could barely mention Islam yesterday. Today it's all about Islam on the date he was giving his big economic speech. So I'm not 100% sure about that. That said, Michael Danby, Taylor's start so far, what do you make of it?
I'm yet to be convinced. You wish all people who are starting off in politics well. But I would have gone for Hastie, but I'm not a Liberal, and I'm not choosing who their leader is. So he has a lot of meat to put on the bone. He's got a big problem with that by-election that's going to take place in Farrer. One Nation and the Independent is off and running, and with Susan Ley, the incumbent, not being the candidate, he could lose. And what would happen if that's the first by-election of his leadership and he loses it? It would be really a bad sign for him.
Michael Kroger?
Well, I think he started well. He's on to the economy, tax, debt, housing and immigration, which are exactly the topics he should be on. And to repeat and to take Michael's point, to do better in Farrer in the by-election than 15 or 20 or 23%, whatever we're on, you're only going to do that if you announce some policies. It can't be on good intentions and, a new leader and a new leaf unless there's something under the new leaf. So he needs to formulate that policy, get it approved and get it released so people have got some meat on the bones. If all you're talking about are Liberal principles, that's great, but it doesn't affect people. They want to know exactly what the policy is. So the sooner he does that, the better. The one other thing I'll say about Angus is I think he's been getting some advice, because if you'll notice, since he became leader, his interviews are short. His statements, the way he presents his arguments, they're shorter, they're sharper, they're clearer, which is regrettably what he didn't do so much as Shadow Treasurer, where he tended to be a little bit long-winded. But he's been very powerful in his presentation over the last few days. Short, sharp, direct, no waffle, and you can feel that he's starting to cut through already. So I think he's made a very good start, and it's helped by people like Jane Hume, who are very economically literate, doing what she did this morning, as you just showed, Andrew.
I thought she was very good there, and I did think Angus Taylor delivered a very good speech to the Centre for Independent Studies today, but I don't know that many people who hear a word of it with this, the Muslim immigration issue front and centre. The Liberals used to put One Nation last, Michael Danby, when deciding their preferences at election. You know, One Nation would say, oh, that's the Beelzebub, that's the devil, we can't do anything with them, which I thought was ridiculous. Former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett now says they should actually swap preferences with One Nation. Is he right?
How far things have changed. That's what the Liberals have got to do. They've got to explain, if they're going to do that, why One Nation has changed, why the circumstances have changed, what the issue of immigration in particular is about, as with these 13 countries that they've identified. Unless they do that and they sit back and just get hit by the Labor Party and the left-wing media led from Ultimo, they're not going to be able to do that, and they'll be excoriated. But Barnaby Joyce is holding the One Nation banner in Farrer, in the bush, and I would say they'd be very formidable down there, and the Liberals would have to consider it from the regional and rural point of view, or however difficult it may be in the city.
Well, that Farrer by-election caused by Susan Lee announcing, right, I'm out of here. If I can't be the leader, I'm out of here. And why not? She's won 7 elections. She's just been humiliated and off she goes. I think she deserves a retirement. But it's a very, very difficult by-election, Michael Kroger. Now, One Nation last time around got less than 7%. 7%. It's going to be a huge test for them and their momentum to win it. It's also a huge test for Angus Taylor to win it. I don't know what the Nationals will do. I saw Bridget McKenzie say we're going to run a candidate. I don't know they've actually decided that formally. That would split the vote. What do you think would happen? What should happen? How big is this? I can't think of a bigger by-election than this one.
Look, it's very important, Andrew, for 2 reasons. It's hard for a new leader to build momentum if you lose a by-election early on, you know, in a Liberal seat that we've held for over 20-odd years. Susan will have a personal vote. The One Nation votes on the increase. Without policies, it's hard. It's very hard to hold that. And secondly, it's important because it tells you whether, it will tell you whether One Nation is increasing its momentum, building its vote, or whether it's going to hit a brick wall. If it hits a brick wall in Farrer, that could retard its progress around the country. You know, the press will start saying they've peaked and et cetera, not a serious party government. So it's a profoundly important by-election for Angus Taylor. So far as One Nation is concerned, I've read, you know, some of their policies, but you know, on government departments, etc. Look, unless you see a full economic treatise from One Nation, well, what are they going to do about government spending, about tax rates, etc., etc.? They're not a serious partner in swapping preferences with, because you know, whilst they're extremely popular in relation to immigration issues, what does it mean for the Australian economy? Now, it is very hard to cut government expenditure, very hard to cut recurrent expenditure. No one wants to increase tax. So you're going to have to want to know exactly what they're proposing to do in that, because if you swap preferences with them, you're impliedly endorsing their policies. So that's an open question, and it's one that shouldn't be rushed into. And I think ultimately it's not something the party would do, because I think on economics they're not. They don't have the restraint that the coalition will need to show leading up to the 2028 election, Andrew.
Here's the problem. The Liberals have fewer policies than One Nation. It's incredible to say, but they do. One Nation has far more policies. It's really weird. You've got One Nation, a party with very few candidates but a lot of policies. You've got the Liberals with a lot of candidates but very few policies. So, my God, I think they probably need any port in a storm at this stage. Michael Kroger, Michael Danby, thank you very much to you both.